there's a third part of the book that talks about creating happy customers, because when you do that, it also motivates your future sales in a way that nothing else can. Knowing how happy you made someone by doing business with you is really a powerful thing.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And man, you'd think that as much BSing as we did in the green room, that my tongue would be nice and warmed up and ready to go, but it was not today. I think it's because I got a distraction over here. Folks off screen, my improvised curtains, because it's that time of year when the sun's coming in. They're beach towels. So I have a very, very colorful curtain right there that just keeps, with the sun coming in on it, my eyes just keep going, ooh, that's pretty.
Go keep the beach towels up, because the more you mess up the intro, we're just trying to talk about big problems. We're trying to close that gap between how many times I've messed up the outro and how many times you messed the intro. I'm still winning or losing, I guess you would say, because I think I've messed it up worse than you. But hey, close that gap for me, Dad.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm sure there might be it might happen again. Hopefully not too soon. And speaking of intros and flubbing things up, Bob King's joining us, not the flubbing things up, but what came to my mind. So what came to my mind, Bob, was this.
Yes, sir.
Because I always have my first question, but after I flubbed it up and we were talking, I was thinking, closing guy. Making that, you got to say those words in the right sequence, in the right order. What do you do when you go, bleh, with that client? You're ready to go.
Well, I mean, hopefully if you know what you're going to say in certain parts, but in the warm up, you're just getting to know that person typically. So it can be a little awkward, and you just stay with it. Just what you did, just be human. Be a human being and allow yourself to be known and be interested in the person that you're talking to, and have that intention of getting to know them, so you can, really be an expert and understand their needs and be that change agent that salespeople, at their highest and best are.
Could you talk some about maybe because what I guess is the reason people fear that so much and fear flubbing up the lines and those kind of things, especially in a sales context, is a little bit of ego, but then maybe even just the worry of and I guess this might fall under ego, but the worry of if I am not communicating perfectly, that they might not get the point, or they might think I'm, not who I say I am, or anything like that. Could you talk some about what those fears are and maybe how people can, move past those?
Well, I think when you're showing up, to meet the customer or they're walking into your store or whatever it is, that first encounter, it's perfectly fine to be human however you are, just let yourself be loved. Really, it's okay. And then, but when you're talking about your product, when you're talking about how it's going to meet their needs, when you're talking about your company, that's really where you want to be a professional, where you want to be able to put on that lab coat and give them the confidence that they need to move forward by being very certain about what you're going to say. It still needs to sound fresh. Shouldn't sound like a canned pitch or something like that. But, that's where if you start stumbling, you're going to come across as either unprofessional or even insincere, like you're trying to get something across that isn't necessarily true. And that's where you don't want to be that way. But, just doing an intro or an outro, hey, it just makes you more lovable.
That's right. And I'm a lovable guy.
Yes, 100%. Sir. I actually have a follow-up on that. Talking about, when you're in the actual sales pitch, talking about your business and those kind of things, and wanting to get it more right versus then maybe in the intros and those kind of things, you could flub things up a little bit more. And it's that personal aspect. Right. How much value is there to that? It's almost, and I remember I've seen this before from a marketing guy, you want to misspell something in your email so that they go, oh, it's a person writing it. Is there a little bit of that comes into play when it comes to those conversations also?
I mean, I'm so human that's not really a problem. I know I'm going to do something like that. So, I don't really worry about intentionally doing it because, just my own whatever, we'll take care of that. But sure, if you're a robot, definitely you want to seem human.
That's right. You got to train your AI bot to make a misspelling every 17th word or something.
Which is why that was an email
preloaded. I'm a pretty good speller, actually. That's not where it would come, but I'll do something stupid. Don't you worry.
Yeah, explains why that's an email trick, not a sales trick. I heard, right?
Yeah.
So in that, and what I'm hearing, it's about the relationship, which, that's why we got you on the show. If you were a transactional guy, you wouldn't be on the show. I can just tell you that right now.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And it's
there's an audition process that, by the way, for those at home, you gotta meet with these guys and be charming AF, as the kids like to say, or you're not getting on this one.
We're very, very scrutinized. And,
they give you a smell test over internet, which is really a skill.
So one of the things that, in my experience in developing that relationship, being able to be that authentic is being comfortable with who you are. And you said that I'm very human. How did you come to that point of, hey, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to show up, like it or not. That's the way it is.
Well, look, you have to be who you are, because if you're being someone else, I would rather be rejected based on who I am than accepted based on something I'm not. That's my personal, that's my whole story in life and all that. And we can get into all that if you want, but yeah, I would rather, people think like salespeople are someone everyone gets along with, and they all think that is not true. A really strong closer, 80% maybe will only do business with them once, they really understand the value of what you're offering. And 20% will kick you out of their house the minute you get there because you're paying too much attention to them, or they just don't like something about how you come across. And if you're trying to appeal to everybody, you're probably not going to have the kind of loyalty among the people that you really appeal to, because they're not getting a big enough sense of who you are to really fall in love with anything about you or about your company or about your product. So I'm a big, proponent of just being who you are, letting the chips fall where they may. And no, you're not going to get every deal, but the ones you get will be like something real and intimate, not something based on, images or fantasy or, presenting something that you think the customer wants to hear. I always think that's a waste of time.
You mentioned it's part of, big piece of, your life and your story of, rather to be disliked for who you are than liked for who you're not. Could you talk a little bit about where that came from? Because I'm curious, that seems something that would be hard to develop. You might've gotten hit in the face once or twice with that.
Well, I'm gay. So, I had to come out. And
that might've been it.
That's what happened. Yeah. And then I made a movie about it called The Disco Years, which is part of the first Boys Life collection from Strand. So it's a 30-minute piece about growing up in the 70s and that journey from, trying to hide to being, who you are out there. So I think it was good training. I think that's great training for just living in the world as the full expression of yourself rather than trying to figure out what people want. It's so painful to live your life based on an image that you want, that you think people will like, versus just being who you are.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask this before you go, Dad, because I always ask you this version of this question. We talk about Green Berets, and I'm like, well, Dad, you guys are such great team leaders, and you can't just take everybody and throw them out in the mountains, and then they'll be Green Berets, and then they'll come back. Like, that's not a real efficient training process. Well, Bob, we can't necessarily put everybody through that situation either, where they're going through that process of having to live that lie, and then coming out and, going through that in order to feel really confident and comfortable being themselves. What have you done, or maybe what are some of those mechanisms that you've done to, or figured out to pass those lessons along, rather than, I guess what's the equivalent of that, dropping someone off for 6 months where they have to live a lie like that, just like dropping someone off for 6 months in the mountains. It doesn't really work. You can't pitch a business on that,
You mean for training people?
Yeah, for training and passing on those lessons. Because I always think it's interesting when there's this mechanism like that that's hard to, bottle up and teach someone else.
I keep thinking about when I'd be in a home and, when politics were a little less volatile than they are now. And someone would say to me, like while we're signing paperwork, you're a liberal, aren't you? I'd be like, first of all, I find that I have more in common with people who care about politics than people who don't vote. So I'm pretty sure we have a lot in common, whatever your politics are. And who do you want to buy solar power from? Someone who doesn't believe in global warming?
I love it.
Oh man, it's going to take me a minute to come back from that one because that's so funny. Please tell me you use that line at least once.
Hundreds. Yes. Although you're never supposed to talk politics. I only say it when they bring it up. I don't impose my politics on a customer because it's impolite. You're in someone's home. When you go in someone's home, and maybe that's the balance. Like I act like an invited guest and I have respect for the person who invited me to their home. And when you come at it from that approach, you can be anyone you can be who you are. That doesn't give you a license to be rude or to pick things to argue about. I'm there to find common ground with my customer. I'm there to be a change agent and get them something they want. And so, when you filter everything through that, who you are is pretty delightful for the most part to most people. If unless you're like a serial killer or something like that. But if you're just someone who has strong opinions about things and an expertise in something that they're interested in, they're going to like you most of the time.
That is so true.
By the way, I don't really care if my customers like me. I care if they trust me. And that's the other thing, and that's the other thing, like, and maybe this ties back into it, where in sales, there's always there are always going to be moments where you have to decide, am I going to say the thing that makes the customer like me, or am I going to say the thing that makes the customer trust me? And so that means a lot of times telling them something they don't want to hear, oftentimes something that other salespeople selling the same stuff just blew smoke up their ass. And now you're the guy that has to say, like, guess what? That's smoke someone's blowing up your ass. And here's the reality of the situation. I love being that guy. Like, I absolutely love being that guy because a customer will never buy from someone they don't trust. They will buy from someone they don't like if they trust them. And most of the time, by the time they're buying, they're going to like you. So I do everything I can do to build trust with that customer, and really not a lot to make them like me. I'm much more focused on what's going to build trust with that customer than what's going to make them like me or telling them something they want to hear.
That's such a powerful thing, and it's reminded me of something that Camden and I've talked about, and I've talked with my coach about it. She's called me out on it. It is that building the confidence with clients or customers, future or current, and instead of the lecture to them, the here's the values or the features, the classic. Here's the features of the used car, sort of thing.
Well, I want people to know what those are. I do want them to have that as part of their pitch. But that's not the whole pitch, right? Mm. So, but when you're talking about like the product, you really should know what you're going to say. Like you can't make that up every time and be a professional.
I'm glad you brought that up because, one of the things that I've always thought about in the old sales script sort of thing is I hear for myself, when I read a script, I hear it different. Like I probably, there's a really good chance that I would not have flubbed up the intro if I had it up in front of me and I was reading it. Mm-hmm. And so I've always been curious about that. And I'd love to get your opinion on the sales script.
I'm going to coach you now on reading the intro. I can do that if you want. Like, let's have a jam session on that.
I'm hurting on it. It's
first
really
thing
hurting.
is you got to commit to what you're saying. Like literally pick every third word and emphasize it, and it will be 100 times better. Like go ahead, let's hear it.
Well, shoot. Now I got to think of it again. Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we
Okay,
talk.
blah, 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 blah. A little boring. I want you to pick every third word, just like welcome to, literally pick every third word and say it differently, either louder, slower, give a pause, make it higher. Try that.
Because I was going to say, Dad, I feel like you did it naturally on the first little bit there. Wouldn't you agree, Bob? Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're presenting, it's a heightened form of naturalism. You want to come across as natural, but you have to emphasize words because that's what gives something meaning. If no one's, you could say that 1,000 times and no one's even going to perceive what you're saying. If you just punch the word father, see what happens.
All right. Welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact.
The magic just happened. So, and you can go further. It felt good, right? It felt better, right, Otis?
Yeah.
Oh. So, like, go with that. And when it feels good, and so if someone's starting off when they're presenting, it's really hard to get them out of their comfort zone where they just sit there and read like this, blah 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 blah. I make people watch a newscast, and then we'll literally pick up any piece of written material. They'll read it the boring way. If you want some to take in what you're saying, you have to choose emphasis on certain words in order for what you're saying to have meaning to the person who's listening to it. And that and actually it's a really important thing because it means you are choosing to give a certain word meaning. And when you do that, the listener pays attention. If you're just blah, 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 you're not inviting their attention. You're saying this isn't important. You don't listen to this. We're just getting past this so you can get to the show. And so whenever you're reading something or something that you do every week, we'll see how you do at the end, Camden. But whenever you're reading something when you're doing your pitch, which is a script, let's face it, when your company story, your product pitch are usually a script, and hopefully you're making them feel the pain of their current situation is essentially the same every time. And not because it has to be. It's something you're going to do 2 or 3 times a day if you're a professional. And if you do something 2 or 3 times a day, like it can't be different. It's just your brain is, you have to willfully not be good at your job to not know what you're going to say about your product or your company every time. And so you have to make it sound fresh. But what makes it fascinating is not whether it sounds like you're making it up. What makes it fascinating is you picking words here and there, pausing, going up, making certain things important. So when you punched father and then you did something 2 words later, I forget what word it was, but it was like, oh, he gets it. Like now he knows how to be interesting. Now he knows how to be fascinating. And being fascinating, if your job is talking about is closing people, the bar is be fascinating. You have to be fascinating literally from the minute you engage with the customer to when you ask for the deal.
What do you say to folks who are just so confident in their service or their product that it is just so good that they feel like the sales almost I'm trying to think, not important, but it's like, I don't need to learn all this stuff. Bob, haven't you seen the new car we built? It's perfect.
Yeah. I want to live in that world where the best idea always wins. But that's not my experience of the world. What happens is whatever flaw. Well, okay. If you don't have closing skills, you're probably just a great presenter, right? And when you're a great presenter, all you're doing is setting that customer up. You're making them want the change you're advocating. You're making them want the product you're showing them. And if you don't close them, they are a sitting duck for someone with a lower price, oftentimes an inferior product, or someone with a higher price that just knows how to close them. So you're not doing them any favors, and you really are. So, if your goal is to be of service to the customer, and most people like, oh, I don't want to close them because it's like, I'm imposing something on them. And you're not. You're basically getting them what they want. If you work for a good company that's going to take good care of them. If you work for scoundrels, then, of course you shouldn't, but then what? I don't know. You have to believe in what you're doing. So
that's, what that reminds me of is the old image that so many, it's not old, it's still new, they're still current. So many people still have of salesmen. The used car salesman that's going to swindle you with the shell game, and I got to go talk to the manager and this and all that.
Because we still train people like that. We still train. I mean, I wrote my book called The Joy of Closing. I happen to have a copy right here.
There
listening, and I wrote my book because I really didn't want anyone else to be trained the way I was, which was to engage. Well, first of all, to stare at the picture of the Ferrari I want to buy or the place I want to take my family on vacation, and then use that to motivate my self-will in such a way that I can roll over the customer and make them do what I want, usually with some trick to engage their greed right after I ask for the deal. That's basically how they train closers. And my experience, it was so powerful because, I was trained that way and I didn't think it would work, but then it did. And then I left, I found out I was working for Scoundrels, worked for a slightly better company and then a solar startup, trained other people to close, and then really got the opportunity. That startup kind of blew up because, for reasons of its own. And then I had this opportunity where I worked for, a great company that had a great option, the best option for customers. And I had to figure out a way to still be a closer without using those tricks. And really that's why I wrote the book, because there is a way. And it starts with belief, but it's not just belief. You still need to, some of the tricks are great. Like being able to earn that customer's business or at least make the strongest first impression at the first meeting is a trick that every salesperson should use. Like there's no benefit to losing the element of surprise or trying to get the business after the first meeting when, you could have maybe, or at least come a lot closer than anyway. So I, there are lots of tricks I pull from one call closing that I think are applicable to way more businesses than people realize. But I think the stigma of a closer, every time someone on one of my sales teams would, and I mastered closing by training others. Like that's, the yogis say, if you want to learn something, practice it. If you want to master it, teach it. I really did master closing by teaching others. And there's some things you just know how to do. I know how to turn salespeople into closers. That's my unique gift that I'm here to, help in the biggest way possible, which is why I wrote the book, because I can only see so many people and not everyone can afford my fee. But and we can get into the details of that and things like that. But I think how it relates. Well, but the stigma of being that, exorcist guy with the briefcase walking down a dark hallway when you're walking home from the deal is really not what it's like to earn a customer's trust. Earning a customer's trust is a beautiful experience that is great for the customer and great for you and great for your company, and is really the best way to be in the world if you have a valuable product that is, and you work for a reputable company that's going to do a good job.
Why do you think just to put it broadly, the bad sales perpetuates in that way? You just said because we're still training people that way. Is there an element of it that, we kind of broadly as the customers put up with it, and so they're allowed to perpetuate it from the training side? Or what are your thoughts on that? My
theory is there's something really valuable in that training, which is belief. It allows you to marshal belief, but it's perverted in and not in a good way. It's perverted by usually the best companies, the best training to be a closer is from companies that no one should do business with. So it's this weird thing. And then there's been like all these innovations and advancements in sales training, in how to present the product and how to engage with the customer, how to ask discovery questions that don't feel like you're, trapping them and things like that, that not to get the shackles up on their neck. There's lots of great stuff about that. But the intimacy that it takes to earn someone's trust, or what you do after the first or second no, like none of that is really talked about in, any way that I think expresses the nobility of getting, getting someone something they want is a very powerful experience. And that alone can fuel your enthusiasm. You don't have to look at the picture of a Porsche. You actually could just be there to connect with that customer and help them get something they want. That is a beautiful motivation that expands every time. And then there's a third part of the book that talks about creating happy customers, because when you do that, it also motivates your future sales in a way that nothing else can. Knowing how happy you made someone by doing business with you is really a powerful thing.
It's, I think what it comes back to is to truly be human is to serve others. And if you're that hard closer, the transactional guy, you're not serving. But the type of closer you're talking about is somebody that is serving. And that's, I think, for me, that's what I'm hearing as a huge differentiator.
But the culture of sales, it's so much easier to say, I'm that guy, right? And be at the top of the leaderboard. But that just wasn't my experience. I was at the top of the leaderboard, but I wasn't like, I'm going to close those guys. I was like, I just wanted someone to say that. I wanted to read something that said it. There isn't any, I'm like everybody else. I created you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I created a business to fill a need. I did not feel like anyone was training people the way I like to train people and the way I like to be in that world myself, which is, the only thing more satisfying than finding what you want and knowing it is being able to do that for someone else. And at its best, that's what closing is. It's not about, your will versus the customer's will or anything like that. Yes, you need a lot of presentation skills. You need commitment. You need closing skills to work with but it's an intimate experience. It's not a rolling over the customer experience. And a lot of what's out there about closing and stuff is mostly focused on that.
I'd love to dive kind of deeper into what I would call like the market maturity aspect of sales, which is, like talking about the used car salesman. The reason we all have that opinion is because we kind of learned the tricks a little bit. And now we all know those tricks. So when we hear somebody talking like that, we can kind of see it coming and it puts that, red flag up for us.
Right.
I can see how, that's obviously a continuous process. I'm thinking of, my wife got a quote for, we have a baby shower coming up and she got a quote for some food. Right. And I remember she was talking to me. It's like the guy just kept talking of the value and to this and this and this and literally just listing out the value. She was like, I'm tired of you selling me. Just tell me the price. And it kind of reaches this point where and she's not in business. She completely different. It works in a completely different area, but she had that maturity, even though she's never done any sales training or anything. Where she saw the value stack and was like, "All right, stop it! You're just trying to sell me." That kind of thing. What do you make of that, like market maturity and trying to stay on top of things? Because I know I'm asking a very big question, so I hope you could pick a jumping off point because you're sharing the knowledge, so you're maturing the market. I think it's an interesting place.
Sounds like that guy bored your wife, and you can't bore a customer. You really can't bore a customer. When a customer says, "Just give me the price," what you want to do at that point is do a forecast. Typically, hey, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go over blah, 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 and then I'll tell you how much it cost. Sounds good? And it's just, that was someone with like, just didn't have the sales skills to do that. But yeah, when you've talked about like things that a sales call is a striptease towards price, and you don't show them the goods until the money's in your G-string. Okay. And the money in your G-strings means you've done a full and thorough presentation. You've talked about your company. You've talked about why other people do this thing. Usually 3 reasons. That's my sales innovation is the 3 reasons. It's in my book in the Feel the Pain chapter. So if you're, want to hear that, you can go find it in the audiobook or whatever. But you've done a full presentation and then you give them the price. And so sometimes a customer at that point, and this is probably true of your wife, just needs to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? So yeah, because you have to make the customer feel uncomfortable with their current situation, right? And, in the case of catering, maybe it's like, you're talking about what it's like to do it on your own versus hiring someone to do it or whatever it is. But she has to feel the pain of either hiring the wrong caterer or trying to do it herself and not really being able to enjoy her own party or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes like it might be with certain products and a longer presentation, but you want to make reference to it, right? And when you do, that customer is going to become uncomfortable. And then, you let them wallow in that discomfort. You show them the pleasure of your solution. That hopefully that gets them a little excited. And then you want to kind of say, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my company, go over some of the options for you for your meal, and give you a price. Does that sound good? And if that salesperson had done that and maybe been a little bit better at talking about whatever they were talking about before your wife said, just give me the price, then, it would have gone better. I'll tell you what will fail every time is when a customer says, just give me the price, and you give them a price. When you do that, you have now basically admitted that everything you're there to do is worthless. And you're just basically there to give them a price. And if the customer perceives you like that, which clearly your wife did, that you're not going to get their business. I guarantee you she didn't hire that guy or gal.
No, we did not. And to your point, they didn't do a good job presenting the pay because I think I'm going to be grilling up all the carne asada for the baby shower. But
and they might have the best carne asada you've ever tasted.
Yep.
And if he had just brought a little sample of carne asada, started with a sensual experience, your wife would have listened to everything they had to say. But he did not get her attention. He didn't engage her emotions. As she got bored and said, just tell me the price. Like at that point, you got a lot of work to do when a customer says, just give me the price. You really have to get them engaged at that point. And
talking about the market maturity aspect there, then, is it essentially that the knowledge of the sales tactics or of the closing tactics is not inherently dangerous to the close as much as it just means you have to have a good version.
You have to be fascinating. That person probably flubbed up the blah, 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 blah. And then I got to talk about this. Maybe they had a giant binder of pictures of food from other parties and he's going 1 page a minute and there's 60 more. And your wife is like, holy cow. I don't know exactly how that person screwed it up, but I can tell you your wife was bored and not fascinated. And sorry, you got to be fascinating. Look, when you show up at that house or you show up at their business or whatever it is you're showing up for, the customer thinks they're going to get two things from you: a scope of work and a price. Mm-hmm. That's all that they want when you get there. And if that's all they want when you leave, you have provided no value to that customer and no value to your company. So you just have to have more ambition than that. Mm-hmm. You have to have the ambition of informing the customer in a way that they can, or giving them all the information they need to make an informed decision, doing some price conditioning so that when you hand over that price, it seems reasonable, and then working with their resistance when they, and that means, there's a whole long thing on that, which, that's a skill that you develop over time. But it really starts with the intention to get their business on the first day. I work with a lot of B&B clients now that really you're not even meeting with the decision maker. You're meeting with someone who can say no, but you're not meeting with someone who can say yes. And the quicksand you fall in there is thinking, well, I'm going to save it or something like that. But the truth is, that person is either going to go to the person who can say yes and say, I met with all these guys, but this one company really sounds like the right fit for us. You want to inspire that. And if your goal is not to inspire that, if your goal is just to sort of give them a scope of work and a price, you're not providing a lot of value to your company, and you're not making the most of the opportunity. And it's hard to feel good at the end of that meeting. You're not going to feel like you connected with another human being, that you established your expertise, and that you used it to get them something they want. You're just they might as well buy it online at that point.
That's so true. I didn't think about it that way. I would love to talk about the dilemma of the salesman to the sales manager. And,
oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, there's a chapter on that. It's only about 4 pages, but I think you would enjoy it.
Does it say reference Cam and Otis in there?
It's called Managing Your Manager.
Oh.
And basically what it says I had a real challenge with that, especially when I went from being a sales, well, I was a VP of sales, but someone who managed salespeople to a salesperson, which happened at, one of the companies I worked for. It's a lesson I had to learn the hard way by picking fights and kind of being a jerk about it. If you're a manager, first of all, you have to recognize the position you're in, right? There is, in any sales situation, there are good and bad leads, good and bad territories, good and bad time shifts. There's always a distinction between the opportunity that you have as a salesperson and the person standing next to you. And typically, well, always those decisions almost always are made by a manager who gets the good leads, who gets the bad ones. And they're often based on the perception of how good your success. So if your manager does not think that you are the person most likely to sell the most likely sale, you're in a really bad position. Like, you need that person not only to think you have the best skills, but also to be invested in your success. You do not want them plotting against you, which I am fully capable of inspiring in a sales manager and have done that. I can tell you for sure. And the revelation I had that inspired me to write this chapter is I figured out the best way to handle my sales manager was to treat that person like my favorite customer. And pay a sincere compliment, fill their bucket. I had a date with someone who talked about how he had risen in the ranks of a phone company, a mobile company, and he talked about filling his manager's bucket. And I was like, what's that? And so, give them good ideas and don't take credit for it. Figure out how to, and the minute I heard it, I'm enough of when I hear a great idea, I mean, I've been to a million sales trainings and most of the time, there's one or two things I get from them, but I will take that thing that resonates with me, bring it into a couple of homes and sell like 5 deals that week just because I have a new toy to play with. And I played with that new toy of filling my manager's bucket. And I just did it. In this case, we were struggling. And I was like, what we need is we should hear everyone's company story. And all of a sudden, the team improved their company story. I did mine for the team and a couple of other people that had really strong ones. And suddenly his metric, which was, overall closing rate was like the big thing for him, jumped, and guess who got every great lead after that? So it really makes a difference how that human being feels about you. And so I just treat them like I wouldn't argue with my favorite customer. I would find common ground and celebrate, things that we accomplish together and things like that. So that's the secret. Just treat them like your favorite customer.
I'd be curious to hear, kind of taking that relationship, talking about the sales department there, sales manager going one step above. What do you think is the issue? Is there a disconnect between maybe the way CEOs view their sales department? Because I think, to your point, I think these are mostly probably not the people we want to be learning from. But I think of some folks will talk about their sales department almost like Mr. Burns, like release the hounds button. Of it's just like let the dogs out, and it's like these dogs gonna go tear somebody apart to bring back the food for all of us. So there's a weird disconnect there. Yeah,
it's amazing to me how CEOs, unless they came from sales, and I don't mean like an owner that did their own sales, because an owner that did their own sales, I mean, we should talk about that because I know you have a lot of customers like that, and that's been a real revelation to me about what the difference is as they expand. There's one mistake they make every time. And we can talk about that in a second. But to answer your question, unless the owner of the company is directly, was a salesperson that became an owner, the minute a company becomes successful, the first thing they want to figure out is how to pay their sales team less. It's the dumbest thing ever. And I don't have any sales manager clients, but it always amazes me how they just drink the Kool-Aid and participate in it instead of saying, hey, this is what got you, to the success we have. Why are, a huge commission is 10%, right? And that means 90% is just going right to the company, right? And if you have a decent profit margin, a nice chunk of that. So why would you compromise that? But yeah, it's a very foolish move to try and, salespeople make more money than anybody else in the company. It's why we're talking about sales. It's why I got into sales. I'll tell you that much. And stumbled into it, but I needed to make money, and salespeople should make more than their manager. The top salespeople almost always make more than a sales manager, which is maybe why they are willing to conspire with the owner to have them make less. But I don't think that is the best way. I work for a company now where they've never done that, and I didn't know how rare and wonderful that was until I started consulting for others.
All right, go ahead. Tell us that CEO problem.
I know you said you work with a lot of owner CEOs and things like that want to expand their business. And one thing I've noticed when that happens, they obviously have to hire a sales team, right? That's kind of the first thing they have to do, because until you have sales, you don't need operations. And so, until you expand your sales, you don't need to expand your operations, right? And so what they'll do is they'll hire people based on their presentation skills, and they'll watch them talk about, the thing that they've been selling for whatever years, and think, oh, this is going to go great. It goes back to that idea, where the best idea always wins. And, we live in that fantasy world, right? That isn't my experience of the world. And so what happens is they go out and they don't close the way the owner closed. And no one can figure out why. And I will tell you, the reason is, well, they didn't hire closers. They hired presenters. They didn't hire a closer. And you're better off hiring someone that gets along and takes an interest in people than you are someone who can talk about your product in a way that, outdazzles your own spiel. Because what an owner has that presenter probably doesn't, if they're not making sales, is belief. The owner created that company to fill a niche, right? And it was successful because it did. So they have the confidence that they're going to satisfy that customer in a way that no other company can. The owner knows their own intentions. They know that when they take on a customer, even if things don't go perfectly, they are committed to making them happy. Mm-hmm. And when you bring that into a meeting, it is far more powerful than anything you can talk about regarding the product or how much money the customer is going to save, or all the other great things about doing this that presenters are really good at making the customer aware of, but they don't make them feel like the company's going to take care of them. And they don't really understand the unique value proposition of the company, even in terms of where it fits in the marketplace. And so the owner comes built in with a kind of confidence and a kind of belief that they need to transfer to their sales team, and it literally does not even occur to them.
Do you think it's so difficult to transfer that? Because it kind of goes back to the idea, Dad, we always talk about the entrepreneur with the baby, and it's like, you don't want anyone calling your baby ugly. Is there a little bit of that it's almost like you have trouble sharing that confidence because you're worried about bringing someone else into this thing that you've worked so hard on? Or what do you think creates that barrier?
Because it requires closing. The owner needs to close the sales team on closing customers. When I became a consultant, one of the hardest things for me to learn, and it's weird because I am a closer, was I have to close when I'm working with a new sales team. The first thing I have to do is close them on making a change. I have to attack the status quo of their current approach to sales, and it's uncomfortable. And it makes the sales manager or the owner who hired me uncomfortable. And if they are super sensitive to that, then the other thing I learned is I have to get a commitment from them about here's what we're looking to accomplish, and here's how we're going to accomplish it, and here's how much that's going to cost in the initial phase. And I need to get that commitment from them before I will work with them, because again, we don't live in a world where the best idea always wins. or where, people have their perceptions of stuff that have nothing to do with reality. And that is much more important than having the best idea. And so the answer to your question is the owner needs to close them. And unless the owner has a conscious awareness of this, it's just not on their radar screen.
All right, I got to shift gears because this question has been bothering me. Yeah, bothering. It's not bothering. Wrong word. It makes it sound negative. It's not negative. But I'm just really curious. Movie or sales? Chicken or egg? Which one came first? Did you learn sales to sell your movie, or
I wish. Well, that's the crazy thing. So I was like more successful than a lot of people I went to film school with, but I never made money. And I never really inspired people, more than a very small number of people, to hire me. And I couldn't understand why. I knew I was talented and I had important things to say, and actors liked working with me, and the actual job of filmmaking, like, I think I was pretty good at, but the job of getting someone to hire me as a filmmaker, I utterly failed at. And so when I started making, I took this. I always loved con artist movies, and like The Lady Eve and The Sting, and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Like, I just love those kind of movies. And so when I went into this job interview, and I met this guy who could sell you a blender at the state fair on the day you never thought about blenders, and he said they paid you $1,200 to train. Well, $600 a week for 2 weeks to train. I was like, who does the training? He said, I did. And then, being a closer himself, he said, so, listen, I don't say this to everybody, but this is yours if you want it. Are you in? Are you out? And, he was asking me to make a decision, not go home and think about it, not, mull my options, do research on who they are as a company, see if it's someone I want to work for, see if solar power is something. He asked me to make a decision right then and there. And I said yes. And then, as I got into and so I did the training, found out the little trick they did to engage the customer's greed in the second week. I was fascinated by it. It did not disappoint. It was like a whole thing. It's all in the book. And then I started going, and so I thought, well, I owe it to him to go on a couple of leads. He paid me $1,200 and he told me the secret, and I'm probably making a movie about this someday. And then I started going on leads, and I started selling deals. Like, the trick worked. But also, it wasn't just the trick. It was also presenting, and how you present, and how you engage with the customer, and all that stuff. I trusted this guy. And so I would call him up after a lead, tell him about the lead. Because I trusted him, I would tell him exactly what I did to blow the deal. And he would impart a lesson. And the first thing I thought of when he would say, oh, you made it about you, is how disastrously I had handled the same situation in my film career, and why I had never been hired, despite the fact that I had a movie in Sundance and plenty of stuff to show that I was capable of making another movie. I didn't have the skills to make someone want to work with me. And so it was this weird dichotomy where I could kind of see through the cracks of who I was working for, and like, maybe this wasn't the best idea, but I was learning so much and growing in ways that, like, I had been stunted for all those years because no one told me how to close. No one told me how to engage with a customer and create that and build trust and create that bond. And so, but eventually, it really wasn't that long that I worked for that company. I had to change. But it's really started this, like, what I consider to be a lifelong process of how to build trust and get someone something they want. And so that was the inspiration. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was great. I love that bit of the story too, because it's fascinating to seek out and then realize what you're doing could have helped you before, but you
Oh
couldn't be
man.
what you're doing now if you hadn't failed at what you were doing before.
Well, I could have had a V8, when you're driving to like 3 houses a day and dealing with widows and orphans and tricking them to buy solar it was pretty strong at that point. Now, when I learned all the things I've learned from this and grown in the ways that I've grown and helped the people that I've genuinely been able to help, I feel great about, it's my path, and I did not think that learning how to close deals would make me a trustworthy person. But it turns out the best way to earn someone's trust is to be trustworthy. And, I didn't see that coming.
Oh, that's great.
And it came to me in the unlikeliest of ways, but it did come. So I'm really grateful for all that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, and speaking of learning, man, I want to go back to something I thought was of what I learned that it really hit home with as a strong closer, you're expecting 20% to kick you out of their house. That's a lot of people,
If I didn't get kicked out of a house at least every couple of months, I would look at what I'm doing and going, wow, I'm not coming across as forcefully as I need to.
That is a great data.
And if you've never been kicked out of a customer's appointment, like you're not doing it. It is a fun thing. I mean, you don't feel good when it's happening, but it is hilarious. It is really funny.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Of course, I didn't meet with Camden's wife, so you never know. She sounds like a tough customer, but I bet I'm not blaming her for this. I'm 100% blaming the boring person who came to her house and did not engage her emotions.
100% on that, and I can also tell you the price point is not comparable enough for all that big value stack that he kept trying to sell the whole time. I can tell you that too. But no, as far as what I learned, it's this interesting piece that Dad, we always talk about, like people think they don't have to sell. It's like you got to sell your team on the vision, these aspects, and how much as an entrepreneur, you are selling. And I love the distinction, and Bob, I've been pondering this since we had you on that pre-show call you referenced earlier, but of the distinction, of the closer versus the presenter. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting to me is how, as an entrepreneur, because like you're talking about being fascinating, just being confident, being so interested in the idea because you're so committed to it, you're working on it so much, just how much that helps you to be better at the presenting, to be better at the closing. And it's because you are just like, I mean, come on, we could talk to almost any entrepreneur about their idea and they're going to sound fascinating because they are just fascinated by their own idea. And I think that's such an interesting little piece that I hadn't fully put together.
Bob, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
I learned that you can teach an old dog new tricks, and I can't wait to hear your intro on the next episode of this podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Perfect.
Now the pressure's on. Bob, how do folks find you, buy your book, learn more about what you got?
My book, The Joy of Closing, is on Amazon. Internationally, every Amazon in the world has it, except for some weird, I don't know, there was one or two that couldn't do it, but if you're in the United States or Canada or you can get it on there, and there's an audiobook read by me. There is a Kindle as well as a paperback. My website is joyofclosing.com. My email is bob@joyofclosing.com, and if you buy 20 books, I will give you an hour of my time to get your sales team to read them in the right spirit and start off that conversation. If my book has been helpful to you, please contact me there too. I want to know all about it. And also on LinkedIn. And I have a TikTok called Joyful Closer, but I don't post as much as I should, but I will.
All right. We'll keep an eye out for it. Bob, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
What a treat. It was every bit as delightful as our pre-call, and you guys are awesome. And thank you for going there with me, Otis. That really was inspiring and delightful.
Awesome. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Bob King, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time. And Bob, how was that?
It was great. We're going to run it one more time after we're done, but it was like 90% there.
Perfect. All right. Thank y'all for listening. We'll see you again next time.